Good evening, you handsome lot. On the ramp today, I've got a 2017 Vauxhall Insignia, and it is a 1.6 CDTI, and we're going to be replacing the timing chain on it. This vehicle has covered 162,000 miles, and before we go any further, we're going to do a full diagnostic report on that vehicle. Well, that is enough of that. Now this is a massive job. If you haven't got a cup of tea and some biscuits ready, go and put that kettle on. First things first, we need to disconnect the battery negative first. Now I've disconnected that battery. Because we need to take the subframe off this vehicle, we need to come underneath here and undo the steering joint. Now this, you do actually have to take it off to be able to take it off the steering rack. It is a little bit of a pain, but once you've disconnected it, make sure that you've got your seat belt through the steering wheel, because if you need to start that engine with the subframe off, you're not damaging the clock spring behind the steering wheel. As you can see now, I've done that steering column over there. We have now got it on the two poster. Now it is always a good idea to do that first, because as you can see, you can't really open the doors. But anyway, we've come around now, disconnected the battery. That was a right little fiddle to get off. We need to remove the ECU. This is just a few little plastic clips, and it should just slide out of the way. Now on these newer cars, there's that much stuff, that much plastics and wiring loom that hooks over everywhere. It's just crazy. Now I have removed the battery. The battery tray was a right faff to get out, because you've got to wiggle it past all this wiring loom. But we have now got a lot more access to the EGR valve, the cooler, lots of things, because this complete side of the engine has to come off. Now we're not worried about this yet. We're going to take it up in the air and get the subframe off. Right, well, as you can see, I've got this vehicle fully raised now. We've removed the dry shaft nut, tracker end, anti-roll-bar link, and lots of little bits of plastic trim from underneath the car. And it all takes time. Remember, what you take off, you've got to put back on, and we are slowly building a little bit of a pile up already, and we haven't even scratched the surface. Now, we do need to remove, well, to take the subframe off, we've got to take the exhaust off. And as you can see, the nuts and bolts on the exhaust, they are a little bit crusty, but I'm sure we can get them off. Right, well, we have got this, the exhaust off, and I did have to use the Pickler induction heater for that one, because the nuts were absolutely corroded. Now, providing I've done everything right, I've undone all the bolts that secure the subframe to the chassis. I've also got my apprentice. The blue one's the apprentice, and the other one's a transmission jack. And I'm going to get my other apprentice now, Ben, to give me a hand getting the subframe off. I'm going to put it into a little bit of a time lapse. And there we have it, with a little bit of magic, that subframe is now off. It's mad to think that we've got to do all this work just to get, we haven't even touched what we need to do yet. So yeah, we've got that much room now with that subframe off. I've got dry shafts out, drain the gearbox oil, and then we can go back up the top. Oh, and also drain the coolant out of it as well. Well, unfortunately, we have run into a slight problem with that dry shaft mount there. It is actually corroded, and there's 3 bolts that hold it on, and it should just slide out. But aluminium being aluminium, it's corroded and it's welded itself stuck. So what we're going to have to do is pull the gearbox off the shaft and be extra careful, and hopefully I can get this mounting off, put it in the press and get the shaft out. It's no problem, we'll just have to struggle on. But yeah, right, let's get it dropped down and the EGR and stuff off, I think. Well, we're getting there slowly but steadily. Now, EGR valve with the cooler, it does look a little bit overwhelming to take off, but they are fairly simple to remove. There's only 3 bolts holding them on. Lots of little plugs and connectors and stuff like that. Now, pull it off out of the way. Right, now when it comes off, let me just plonk it down again out of the way. Like that. We don't want water going everywhere. And just at the back, by here, be careful, because a little plastic rubber pipe that you can damage. Be extra careful with that. Let's move around now to removing the rocker cover and the injectors. Now these spill pipes at the top, please be careful when you're removing them, because they will snap quicker than you think they will. Now, we've got to remove all this. Be careful with all this sound deadening or whatever you want to call it. We can get the injectors out to start with. When you go ahead and remove the injectors, please, 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 just give them a little mark on the top, cylinder 1, 2, and so on, so you're not messing them up. And also the same with the pipes and all the little brackets as well. Just number them up so everything's going back in the same place. Right, now we need to get this rocker cover off. We've got to just move this pipe here, slacken that lifting bracket there, and that one there, just for the rocker cover to slide out. And there you have it, that is one rocker cover now off, which will enable us to get this engine timed up. We need to put a little bar through there shortly, which I will show you. Now, let's move round and get this upper timing cover off. With a little bit of magic, that timing cover is now off. Now, there is 2 little threaded parts, one by there and one by there. Obviously, that is the wrong way round. Now, get 2 bolts out the cover, wind them in, and that will help you pull it away from the engine. Now be careful, do not just rely on these. Don't think you can get, put your ratchet in there and wang them up and it's going to pull it off easy for you, because you will snap these. So be extra careful. And also, get yourself a little bit of cardboard box and put your bolts in so you know exactly where they're going. Right, well, I'm pretty much finished now, everything at the top for now. Before we take the engine up, not the engine, the vehicle up in the air, just remove the gearbox mount on the right hand side there, because you do need to support the engine with the frame, and everything now is pretty much from underneath. Should we take it up? I think so. Well, we're now in a position where we can get this gearbox off. Now remember that I need to slide it off that inner dry shaft. I'm hoping if I've done everything right, it should come out. Oh God, it is coming out. I've got all my wires disconnected. Oh, I tell you why I haven't disconnected. You know what I'm always going to say? A clutch pipe. Where's my little bongaroony? Put my little bong on there. Now we can come out, I hope, and everything's disconnected. I'm hoping. Look at that. And there we have it. That gearbox is now out. With that gearbox now on the floor, I've gone ahead, I've removed the sump. Simple reason we need to remove the sump, because we're having an oil pump chain as well. And I've also gone and done all the 13 mils for the lower timing cover, and also put them in a little bit cardboard box. Now I have already pried it off, and that should just pull off. We're going to chuck up there for a second. We're going to just have a look now and see. Oh yeah, oh, she's a bit slack, I'm not going to lie. There we go. Right, well, before we get into the timing side of it, we have stopped for a little bit of lunch. Now I tell you what, I've just discovered these McVitie's Gold Bars. Oh, they are absolutely delicious. So I'm going to have a little muncherini now, and then I'm going to plod on with the timing. I think this is the dirtiest I've been in a long, long time. A little bit of oil has splodged me in the eye. Now, let's get round to locking this crank. Now, there is a little tool that you've got to take the alternator belts off, crank pulley off, and that locks in place just up there. Now, with all that locked in, we can drop the vehicle down and lock the camshaft. Look at my eye. Now, for this next part, we need to get the locking pin for the camshaft, and it slides in that little hole by there. Now, you also do need a 22mm spanner on the camshaft by there, because that tool won't slide in. So you just got to pull the camshaft forward, and that tool now is locked in. Right, let's send the car back up. Let's go ahead now and get this timing chain off. Now, I have put a pin in the tension, I just pushed it back. Now, this camshaft pulley up here, make sure that you put, I don't know if you can focus on it, a little red X on it so you know it's inside and outside, and I'll show you why in a shortly. Right, let's get into a little bit of time lapse and get all this off. I have scooted along and we've got the new timing chain on. Now I've cleaned this engine down. It is a million times better than what it was, as you can see. It is absolutely spotless. Now remember that camshaft pulley when I told you that you've got to mark it? If you have a look at the pulleys themselves, I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this now. Let me zoom in. The actual teeth on it, they've got one side's tapered and the other isn't, and if you get that wrong, that chain's going to be making a hell of a noise. But right, everything's on. Now, the most critical part of this, and this is a manufacturing defect, this is why and what causes all the problems, is the actual tensioners themselves. The reason for it is that little gasket behind it. The original one hasn't got it, and overnight, if it hasn't got that gasket, the oil rolls back, flows back into the engine, and that's where you get chain slap first thing in the morning. And there you have it. That is a timing chain and the new oil pump chain fitted to the vehicle. All we've got to do now is pull that pin, and that is a perfect tension on the chain. Now we've still got to torque the camshaft pulley up, but it doesn't stop there. We've still got all that stuff to put back together and a heck of a lot of cleaning. All this has got to be spotless. That timing cover now is looking like brand new, if I say so myself. Now there is 2 rubber O-rings, one by there and one by there, that you have to replace, which does come in the timing kit. If you don't replace them, chances are it might leak, and we don't want it to leak, do we? Now I've already put some sealant all the way around. We're going to give that a couple of minutes. It is a little bit warmer today, so we can be a little bit quicker. Now I'm not going to get this vehicle done by tonight. There's not a chance, because it is 3:30 now. It's such an absolute horrendous job. Ideally, I want to get the timing cover on, the sump on, and the upper timing cover before I go home tonight. So it's got overnight to sort of dry. That timing cover, well, that lower timing cover is all torqued up now. And everything that I've touched, I've marked to know, so I know that it is torqued up correctly. Now let's move round to the sump. I've taken everything out, even this little baffle here, made it a little bit like brand new inside of it. Now there is a rubber O-ring that you can get from Vauxhall, which is advised to change whenever you remove the sump, because these rubber seals in these engines now, they go so hard, once you disturb them, they will never seal again. Obviously we're going to put our sealant on and make sure that that engine is nice and clean for reassembling. Right, well, everything now underneath is done. We need to go ahead and torque the camshaft up. Now what we need to do is grab a 22mm spanner and hold the camshaft while you're torquing them up, because it can turn. And if it turns and it's not right, you won't be able to get your timing pin out correctly. And it should just pull out without any restrictions whatsoever and go back in. And if it is tight coming out, just slacken them off and just keep fiddling with your camshaft. It's got to be perfect. Now this part always makes me just a little bit nervous, because if this isn't right, you've got to take it all off again and seal it up. Now this timing cover, it overlaps the lower timing cover. Now in the corners here, you've got to put quite a lot of sealant on it and make sure that everything is clean. Doesn't look pretty, but this is going to seal. You don't want this not sealing. Well, good morning, you handsome lot. We head into the second day now. I've got so much to do to get on with this morning. I've got a crankshaft oil seal to put in, flywheel clutch, try and get the gearbox back on. I don't really want to be taking this dry shaft out, because I've had a little think overnight, because if I take it off and as I'm pressing it out and that mount cracks, well, this job's absolutely stuffed. So I'm going to plod on and try and get this gearbox back on. And there we have it. That is the brand new flywheel clutch pressure plate, and also a brand new concentric slave. Whenever you fit these concentric slaves, I know it's tempting to squish them in and out, but don't, because you will damage them. Right, let's get this gearbox in. Right, well, I've managed to get the gearbox back on. It went on a lot easier than what I thought, to be honest with you. But now, you lot know how much I've got to put on. Now, it is a good time to give the clutch a bleed and make sure that you're getting a good pedal, because if you put it all together and you couldn't bleed it, or you couldn't get a clutch pedal, you would be gutted. We are making a little bit of progress. We've got the subframe back on, dry shafts back in, tracker ends, ball joints, exhaust back on as well. Now, remember these 3 bolts at the beginning of the video on the downpipe? I put 3 new nuts in this. So if it ever has to come off again, it's going to be relatively easy. And of course, when we put all the bolts back into the subframe, into the chassis, we have used a tiny little bit of copper slip. Again, if it ever has to come off, I'm thinking of the next tech, they're going to come off relatively easy. Right, let's drop it down and do a little bit on the top. Have I got my work cut out for the next hour, 2 hours or so? We've got the EGR to put back on, rocker cover, injectors, and I've also, for the injectors, we've got brand new sealing washers and a brand new rocker cover gasket as well. It's always best practice, replace that while it's all off. Now, all this gearbox, all the cables are clipped back in, all the wiring looms bolted back to the gearbox, everything is happy. Don't forget to plug your crankshaft sensor in as well, because once everything's on, that is a little bit of a pig to get to. But anyway, let's get cracking. Right, well, I am a little bit pig sick, to be honest with you. Now, this car came in running fairly rough, and the colour's just gone out of me. I'll flip it around and I'll show you. Before I put the rocker cover on any vehicle, especially if I've had the injectors out, I always do like to put a boroscope down and have a little look at the top of the pistons, etc. But I don't know whether you lot are going to see it now. We have got a dirty, great big crack on the top of cylinder 4. Cylinder 1 is just as bad. If I can just get the camera in and show you now, this is not what I wanted to see. You can see there where the top of the piston has melted away. But I spoke to the customer and he said, put it back together. It's going back together. If it runs, it runs. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's still going to run lumpy. Well, the car is now all back together. I left the injector disconnected while I wound it over and got the oil pressure up. I've just connected them back up now. I've put my mic on my little bonnet prop there so you can hear the engine starting. Just see what it sounds like. Let's put it. All right, let's get on the key and see what happens. Oh, God, I'll tell you what, if anybody's nervous, it's me right now. Well, it is running. It's running lumpy. I don't know whether you can see. I'll put my microphone over there for you to listen to it. It's running. It's running. As expected, as soon as it gets up to temperature, that car now is running nice and smooth. But it still doesn't fix that crack in that piston. And I am disheartened about it, and I'm sucked the life out of me. But nonetheless, I'm not even going to take it down the road for a test drive, because if something happens, on my head be it. But the customer knows about it. I'm going to connect the steering column back up now. I've done what it came in for. And I'm sure the customer will have to think about that, what he wants to do. But yeah, at least it's running. It's sounding okay. Let's have to see what it's like in the future. Anyway, up until I found that cracked piston, I hope you've enjoyed the video. And if you haven't, tough, pretty much, because I've enjoyed making it. But yeah, please hit that like and subscribe button. Seriously now, that's knocked the wind out of me. Click a like and subscribe button and we'll see you. I think I've got another one to do on Thursday, but yeah. Anyway, let's get it sent.